Notre Dame knocked off Stanford 49-20 in the regular season finale, closing out the year on a 10-game winning streak, all by double digits. But with how everything else unfolded yesterday, the Irish still might not control their own playoff destiny. So did they do enough to impress the College Football Playoff Committee? Sunday Night Live starts right now.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Sunday Night Live here on Locked On Irish. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the last 5 years. Whether you're tuning in live on this Sunday night, November 30th, or catching us as your first watch or listen of the day on Monday, thank you so much for being here. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And before we get going, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. That way, you don't miss any of our daily coverage of Notre Dame football or more live shows like this one. So, Notre Dame closed out its regular season 10-2 with a 49-20 win over Stanford. It was a game that looked like it could be a massive statement early on when Notre Dame had a 35-3 lead going into halftime, and then they extended that lead early on in the second half, 42-3, but it didn't end quite as emphatic as it could have been. And tonight we're going to dig into whether that performance was enough to convince the College Football Playoff Committee that they are one of the 12 best teams in the country. We're also going to talk about how the chaos around college football both helped and hurt the Irish. Mostly hurt, I would say. And we're also going to get into the biggest plays in the game balls from Saturday night and what absolutely needs to happen this next upcoming weekend during the conference championship games in order for Notre Dame to get back to the college football playoff. Then at the end, we're going to get to some of your questions in the chat. As a reminder, when we do these live shows, send in your questions and let us know where you're tuning in from, your hometown or just wherever you're tuning in for today's episode. Really do appreciate it. We've got Josh Lyon here. Go Irish. Paolo, hey brother, good to see you. Let's go Irish. Good to see you as well. All right, now let's dive into the game on Saturday night. So the Irish passed their final test. This was Notre Dame's last guaranteed opportunity to make a statement to the College Football Playoff Committee, and I think they passed it. That was the most important thing that they needed to do. They didn't do it with the same fireworks that we saw against Syracuse, right? But after going up 35-3 at halftime, Notre Dame had already shown more than enough. It would have felt better if they were able to keep their foot on the gas and end up scoring 70 points again like they did last week. Absolutely. But I don't really think it would have changed anything in the grand scheme of things. I don't think the fact that Notre Dame, they're going to be looked at differently because they only won by 29 and Stanford scored another touchdown late when Notre Dame had their backups in. Although they did have their starters in, at least on defense. Like Leonard Moore was out there. He gave up that touchdown in an otherwise fantastic performance by him. But look, this is the nature of the beast. This is what teams are doing. Notre Dame is no different. Even though they had their backups in, they were trying to score in the last drive of the game. I'm sure that there are some bettors out there that really wish Notre Dame decided to play that final play instead of letting the clock run out. But it is what it is. Notre Dame won by 29, and the fact that there are some people who are disappointed by that kind of shows you just how well this team has been playing for the better part of the past 2 months. The only way that Notre Dame could have hurt their playoff chances this weekend by themselves was with a loss, obviously, or like an ugly, sloppy win like we saw against Boston College, and that wasn't the case at all. Notre Dame dominated Stanford for the majority of the night, then they let up late, which allowed Stanford to make the score a little bit more respectable, but to me, in a lot of ways, it actually mirrored how the entire day felt for Notre Dame fans who were scoreboard watching from the Egg Bowl on Friday all the way through Saturday night. I think I watched more football in the past 3 days than I ever have in my entire life. And that is saying something because, on Thanksgiving, I'm watching all the NFL games. Then on Friday, was watching a lot of college football with my family. And then on Saturday, I was glued to the television for the entire day. You think about it, like, Ohio State, Michigan kicks things off at noon. I obviously watched every play of that game and also was tuning in to some of Pittsburgh and Miami as well. And then you've got the games in the 3:30 window, and then Alabama, Auburn at night, and the 7:30, and then Notre Dame caps it off. So that's 4 straight windows where I was glued to the television watching college football. And as we laid out on the show last week, there were several results that could have made Notre Dame's playoff position far more secure. It started on Friday with the Egg Bowl. If Mississippi had beaten Ole Miss, I think Notre Dame would have jumped Ole Miss, and then not only would they have been securely in the college football playoff, there was a good chance that they could host a game. They also could have helped, they could have gotten some help from Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi, if they had upset Miami. That did not happen. Miami throttled them 38-7. They scored another touchdown very late, which they have now done 2 weeks in a row. And, even though we were all rooting for Pitt in this game so that we didn't have to hear about the comparison between Notre Dame and Miami, I just did not have any hope that Pat Narduzzi was going to do anything positive for Notre Dame. As a matter of fact, it would not have shocked me if he threw in the towel in the second half, because that's how Pat Narduzzi is, and he probably would take some joy in the fact that if Miami beat his own team by 1,000,000 points, maybe it could have helped their cause and get them in over Notre Dame. Again, I would not put anything past Pat Narduzzi after his comments in the week leading up to that Notre Dame game. So Notre Dame didn't get Mississippi State, they didn't get Pittsburgh, and they really could have used some help from Washington or LSU. Neither team was able to get it done. That was an excruciating 3:30 window for Notre Dame fans, because Oregon dominated most of the game against Washington. Like, Washington was able to come back a little bit in the second half and make that game a little bit more respectable. It was 19-14, and if Washington made a stop there, they could have had the ball with a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter, but then Oregon broke off this huge touchdown run. But I didn't really give Washington that much of a chance to beat Oregon. I did give LSU a chance in that game because LSU was outplaying them for the vast majority of the game, because John Materi, the quarterback for Oklahoma, was absolutely terrible in this game. He had 3 interceptions, and even though LSU didn't have any semblance of an offense, they were actually in the lead 13-10 late in the game because Materi kept throwing the ball to the LSU defense. Harold Perkins, I believe it was, had an interception early on in the game, and I was yelling, get in the end zone, get in the end zone, get in the end zone, because I knew that LSU's offense was not going to be able to score, and that is exactly what ended up happening. Perkins got caught inside the 5-yard line, and then on LSU's first play on offense, Van Buren, who is the backup quarterback that is filling in for Garrett Nussmeier while he deals with an injury, Van Buren rolls out to his right, has a wide receiver open in the end zone, and instead he throws it right into the chest of Peyton Bowen, a name Notre Dame fans are very familiar with, the safety at Oklahoma. So they get the interception. They're not able to score a touchdown. They were able to get a touchdown a little bit later on, and then they took the lead in the fourth quarter, and I'm thinking, man, if LSU can just get this win, Oklahoma is going to be eliminated from the college football playoff. Notre Dame is going to move up to 8, and they're pretty much in with a win over Stanford that night. If they could have gotten that one result from LSU, they were so close late in the game. Oklahoma has the ball with under 5 minutes left, and somehow, after playing a stellar game on defense all night long, LSU is one of the most egregious coverage busts I've ever seen, and then the Oklahoma slot receiver is wide open 50 yards down the field. He catches it, he scores, and that was the game, because there was no world where that LSU offense was going to score a touchdown late in that game. They could not move the ball all game long, so Oklahoma gets the win, and they are going to be in the college football playoff. But Notre Dame still could have gotten some help from Auburn in the night win, the primetime matchup between Alabama and Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Like, if the boogeyman that lives underneath Jordan Hare, could come out one more time and just help Auburn beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl. They were 5-6 going into the game. They've had a brutal season where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and they had a chance. Alabama was dominating early on. They go up 17-0, but then Alabama starts to figure some things out on offense. They're mounting a comeback, and they have the ball late in the game. Credit to Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, super ballsy call to go for it on that 4th and 2. They score a touchdown, but Auburn has a chance. They're driving the ball late in the game, and then Cam Coleman fumbled the football, their best player on Auburn, who honestly didn't have that great of a game, but he fumbles the ball, and it was sort of the story of the game, right? Because Auburn dropped, fumbled, and tripped over every single opportunity that they had to beat Alabama. The amount of drops in that game was so infuriating. I can't imagine being an Auburn fan, watching your team lose to your rival like that. So Auburn was not able to get home, so none of the results that Notre Dame really need or could have really benefited from happened the way that they wanted. I guess you could say they did get some help from Ohio State, because Ohio State knocked Michigan out of the conversation, although That was the result most people expected, and they weren't really in the conversation that much to begin with. But if Michigan had won that game, they would be another 10-2 team with arguably the best win of anyone in the entire season if they had knocked off the number one team in the country. So at least Notre Dame fans had that. If Ohio State had lost to Michigan, it truly would have been like the Saturday from hell. But that's just sort of the reality of the situation right now. Notre Dame needed some help to feel a little bit more secure. It's not like any one of those results was an eliminator for Notre Dame, but they just weren't able to get it. So the fact that Notre Dame was able to go out and dominate Stanford for most of the game and then not quite finish it off emphatically, I think to me it was emblematic of the entire weekend. So I still believe Notre Dame showed enough in their win over Stanford to prove that they're playing as well as anyone in the country right now. Outside of Ohio State, Indiana, and Georgia, I don't think there's a team playing better football than Notre Dame down the stretch, and I think that helps because the committee does recognize teams that are playing their best ball in November. There are only a handful of teams who can legitimately win a national championship, in my opinion, and Notre Dame proved with their effort on Saturday that they certainly belong in that conversation. And one of the main takeaways I had from watching all of this football over the weekend is that Oklahoma and Alabama do not scare me at all. And I know some people were freaking out on Friday night when Texas beat Texas A&M. Look, I know that technically hurts Notre Dame's resume because Texas A&M is not undefeated, but Notre Dame really cannot have Alabama win the SEC championship, and I think Alabama would beat Texas A&M. I like the chances of Georgia beating Alabama far more than that, so I don't think Texas is getting in. Yeah, it'll be a talking point. Steve Sarkisian can say whatever he wants. They're not getting in. They have 3 losses. If they didn't lose to Florida, a 3-8 team or 3-9 team now, or 4-8, yeah, either way. If they didn't lose that game, they would be in the college football playoff more than likely. I think Oregon is good, but they're beatable. Ole Miss is an absolute dumpster fire right now with everything that's going on with the Lane Kiffin drama now that he's gone. Who knows what they're going to look like with Pete Golding now as their head coach. So if Notre Dame gets in the playoff, they can absolutely win the national championship. FanDuel has them tied for the 5th best odds to win the title, even though their spot in the field isn't even guaranteed. And the goal of the College Football Playoff Committee is to select the 12 best teams. Unfortunately, due to their own rules, the ACC champion and the highest-ranked Group of 5 conference champion will get automatic spots, and they're going to get their doors blown off in the first round, but that is just the system. Notre Dame is a top 10 team regardless, and they have played like one since September. But when you start at 0-2, you put yourself in a position where nothing is guaranteed in late November. But from that point on, the only thing that Notre Dame could control was how they finished, and they finished well beyond my expectations. 10 straight wins, 10 straight by double digits, 2 against ranked opponents. That is incredibly impressive. Now we're going to find out soon enough whether it was impressive enough to make the college football playoff. So while Notre Dame kept its season alive and showed once again how dominant they've become since that 0-2 start, the real story is still unfolding. But before we look ahead, let's take a closer look at what happened on the field very late in the night in Palo Alto on Saturday, because there were some huge moments and some elite performances that deserve some recognition. So coming up next, we're going to hand out game balls and go through the top plays from the win. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams, for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app, and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Prices include fees up front, which I love. No last-second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Welcome back to Sunday Night Live here on Locked On Irish. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. Thanks again to everyone who's tuning in live or for making this your first watch or listen of the day if you're catching us on Monday. Thanks to your support, Locked On is now the #1 sports podcast network, and really appreciate everyone who helped us get here. I'm looking at the chat right now. It's getting pretty lively. Nathan Petiti 22, love it when all three running backs have a TD in the same game. I agree. That was really fun. Really glad to see Aeneas Williams go out there. We're going to talk a lot about him coming up here in a second, but thanks again to everyone who's tuning in live. Remember, send some questions in the chat. We might get to a few of those in segment 3, and let us know where you are watching, wherever you are out there. All right, now let's get into the top plays from the game. We're going to start off with the opening drive because Jeremiah Love got the party started. He ran it down Stanford's throat. He got in the end zone on a 2-yard run, although I thought he was going to break like a couple before that. It's to the point now, whenever Jeremiah Love has the ball in his hands, I'm convinced that he can break it. So the fact that he didn't twice, and there was an opportunity for him to hurdle the Stanford safety, and he didn't do it, that just kind of shows you the type of player that he is, where when he's not breaking off these long touchdown runs, you're almost like a little bit disappointed. Like, is he okay? But he got in the end zone, but then he did get hurt on the next drive on what I thought was a pretty dirty play, to be honest. It looked like the Stanford defender just dove on him and drove his knee into his gut after the play was well over. So Jeremiah Love left the game. I was worried that it could be broken ribs, but x-rays were negative. He said after the game it was just a bruised rib and he could have gone back in right after it happened. I don't know about all that. Notre Dame did end up bringing him in the game later on. I think that was just a way to show the College Football Playoff Committee that, hey, Jeremiah Love is ready to go. He's going to be just fine if Notre Dame were to get in the playoff. But unfortunately for him, he's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. This was his last real audition, I guess you could say. He finished with 14 carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown. So, for Jeremiah Love standards, that's obviously below the standard, but he did get hurt in the first quarter. So I'm not blaming him at all. He dropped from 2nd to 4th on the FanDuel Heisman odds. He is now plus 2,000 behind Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback at IU, Julian Sayin, who had a really impressive performance in their win over Michigan, and then Diego Pavia, who really had a terrific game against Tennessee. But I think basically what Jeremiah Love did this season should still earn him an invite to New York City. If he does not get invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, the award just loses even more credibility for being anything other than a quarterback award. Again, Jeremiah Love's not going to win the Heisman, but he's absolutely been one of the best players in the sport all season long, and he absolutely deserves to be a Heisman finalist. Jadarian Price had a really nice reception on 4th down on the next drive, the same drive that Jeremiah Love got hurt, but then he got tackled inside the 5, although he was able to pound his way into the end zone for another TD, so that the Irish went up 14-0. Really liked how they used Jadarian Price out of the backfield in this game. They actually showed on the broadcast that right now, if you're looking at different NFL mock drafts, Jeremiah Love is obviously the top running back in the draft, and Jadarian Price could be the second highest. Could be the first time that 2 running backs from the same team were the top 2 running backs drafted since Auburn did it, I believe over 20 years ago. So that would be really cool. But unfortunately for Notre Dame, that means there is 0 chance that Jadarian Price is going to come back next year. I get a question about it in the mailbag like every single week. Could Jadarian Price come back? I'm telling you right now, he is not coming back. He's going to go to the NFL, and I think once he does all the testing and stuff, he's really going to impress. I could see him being a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. So Notre Dame goes up 14-0, and then Marty Biagi, the Notre Dame special teams coordinator, pulled out maybe the best fake punt ever when the Irish were backed up on their own 15. And Marty Biagi has said time and time again, he has all kinds of tricks up his sleeve. That's why they're not afraid to run them against Stanford or Arkansas earlier in the year, because when you have a bunch of them, you can really rip them off at any time, and teams are going to have to account for it. But it seems like in this moment, Stanford convinced themselves that there's no way Notre Dame is going to run a fake punt, already up by 2 touchdowns, backed up deep in their own territory. But Marty Biagi said, bet. And he ran a play that I thought was so cool. So Josh Burnham took the direct snap, and then he pitched it forward or passed it forward. It looked like, it was overhand, right? But when it happened live, I thought he just sort of like shoveled it downfield to a wide open Luke Talich, who then took it to the house. It was the 2nd TD in consecutive weeks for Luke Talich, the 3rd touchdown of his career. And man, he looked really good with the ball in his hands. I knew that he was a really good athlete. Did everything for his team in Cody, Wyoming when he was in high school. But man, he just turned the Jets on, and he was off. The Stanford punt returner had no chance. Once he got by him, it was a touchdown. So really, really impressive play design. It makes you wonder, like, what else could Marty Biagi have drawn up here? And if Notre Dame makes it to the college football playoff, maybe we'll get to see. Leonard Moore had a great pass breakup on fourth down on the next series. Interesting decision by Stanford on fourth down to throw right at Leonard Moore, who is definitely the best cornerback in the entire country, and they did it short of the sticks. Again, interesting call for Stanford, but it worked out well for Notre Dame. And then Aeneas Williams joined the party on the ensuing drive. He took the Notre Dame offense right down the field, had a spectacular catch on a wheel route that looked very similar to the catch he made against Penn State last year in the college football playoff semifinal. I also think that was probably CJ Carr's best ball of the day. Just dropped it right in the bucket for Aeneas Williams, got the big gain, and then had some really nice runs on that drive as well before he ran it in for the score. Then Stanford had a field goal to make it 28-3, which gave Notre Dame's offense a chance, I should say, to run the 2-minute drill, and they failed. But fortunately, Stanford made the decision to throw out Leonard Moore again, and this time Leonard Moore made him pay by picking it off, so the Irish got the ball back with about 1:20 to go. Good field position. They went right down the field and scored. Jadarian Price had another nice grab out of the backfield. This time, though, he got in the end zone to make it 35-3 going into the half. In the second half, Jordan Faison made a unbelievable catch down the field, a 54-yard reception with the defender draped all over him, and it fooled the play-by-play guy. He said it was swatted away while Jordan Faison is up celebrating after the fact, and I'm thinking, what was he seeing? Why did he think that he didn't catch it? But then he made the change. I would say Dave Fleming and Brock Osweiler, not my favorite booth. That's all I'll say about that. But Faison was able to finish the drive with a touchdown. Notre Dame goes up 42-3, and you're thinking, man, could they really do this again? Could they really put 70 points up on the board? I mean, it's going to take a lot. They'd have to really put in some effort to do it, but they didn't. And as a matter of fact, Notre Dame kind of took the foot off the gas from that point on. The defense gave up a field goal, then a touchdown, so it was 42-13. But then Aeneas Williams had a really nice 51-yard touchdown run to go up 49-13. That is what he does, man. Williams has 24 carries on the year. That's 10 less than he had last year as a true freshman. But he has 5 total touchdowns, and he's averaging 9.3 yards per carry. So he's basically scoring a touchdown once every 5 carries. You know what they call that? Efficient. So that leads me to the game balls. On offense, I'm giving it to Aeneas Williams. He was the team's leading rusher, finished with 10 carries, 83 yards for 8.3 yards per carry, had that nice long run of 51 yards that I just mentioned, and 2 touchdowns in the game. He also added 2 catches for 40 yards, so 123 total yards for the third-string running back. That's pretty good stuff, man. He is a very good back. I know that he was considering entering the transfer portal once the season was over. Maybe he's still deciding. I think John Bryce from Football Scoop reported last week that it is 50-50. It could go either way, but I'm hoping that this performance is enough to instill some confidence in him and remind him that, hey, next year, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are not going to be on the team. He would be the feature back, and sure, Notre Dame is going to split carries. It could be with Keidron Young once he gets healthy. Maybe it's one of the freshmen, Javian Osborne or Jonaz Welton, once they get on campus. Or maybe Notre Dame decides to dip in the transfer portal. I don't know what's going to happen to the running back position next year. I just hope that Aeneas Williams is part of that room because he's a very talented player. On defense, you got to give the game ball to Leonard Moore. He was unbelievable. They targeted him 7 times. Again, a choice to target Leonard Moore 7 times. He allowed 2 receptions for 9 yards, had an interception and 3 pass breakups. And one of the keys to the game for me when I was doing the game preview for the Notre Dame defense was eliminate C.J. Williams. And you can do that by shadowing him with Leonard Moore. They did not shadow him, but they eliminated him from the game. C.J. Williams, remember, former Notre Dame commit who decommitted, went to USC, spent a year there riding the bench. Then he went to Wisconsin for 2 years, barely did anything. He's had a pretty good season for Stanford on the year. He finished this game 1 catch, 14 yards. So mission accomplished there. They absolutely eliminated him from this game, and a big reason why is Leonard Moore. He was unbelievable, and the fact that he has 1 more year in college is pretty hilarious because I think he'd be a first-round draft pick next April. He is just that good, and Notre Dame has had a lot of really great cornerbacks lately, and Leonard Moore is certainly one of them. I do want to give an honorable mention, though, on defense. Devontae Smith. Man, is he good when he's healthy. If Notre Dame had him against Texas A&M, it really makes you think how that game could have gone differently because he was unbelievable in this game. They targeted him 8 times. He gave up 5 catches for 29 yards, had 5 total tackles in the game. And look, it took him a long time to get healthy, but now that he's healthy, he has been really good for this Notre Dame defense, and their secondary is so stacked with Christian Gray being back and healthy, Devontae Smith healthy, and then Leonard Moore, Adon Schuler. I forgot to mention his hit in that game. That's one of those where you're watching it live and you're like, oh my God, that guy might actually be dead. The way that he was able to just fly down the field and destroy that Stanford running back was one of the best defensive plays in the game. So I'm glad I was able to give that a shout out as well. But those are the standout performances. But for the next week, every Notre Dame fan is going to be sweating. The Irish need some help next weekend. And coming up, we're going to break down exactly what's required from Texas Tech and Georgia for Notre Dame to get back in the college football playoff. Stay with us. Today's episode is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. I have given Omaha Steaks as a gift before, and the reaction is always the same. Excitement when the box arrives and even bigger smiles when everything hits the grill. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and for meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. And the variety is very underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those gifts that truly fits anyone. Honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together, and you don't need to guess anyone's size. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. All right, thanks again for joining us here for this Sunday Night Live edition of Locked On Irish. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. It has been a lot of fun doing these Sunday Night Lives, and next week's edition is going to be very interesting. This time next week, we're either going to be celebrating Notre Dame's birth in the college football playoff, or, I don't know, trying to talk through the depression, I guess. But please continue to chime in the chat. Looks like it's been pretty active today. Ooh, wow. Eric Loeb, 5647, no shot against Ohio State. Wow, that's pretty rude here. Loeb must be an Ohio State fan. But we've got some interesting comments as well. Florida may come after Mike Mickens. Maybe. He's one of the best defensive backs coach in the country. Probably the best coach, the best defensive backs coach, I should say, in the entire country. But I'm not sure. We're going to have to see how that plays out. But we're going to wait and get to all that offseason content when the offseason actually arrives. Because for now, there's still some important football to be played. And it starts this weekend during Conference Championship weekend. So this is what Notre Dame needs. They need Texas Tech to beat BYU. It'd be really nice if Texas Tech just blew the doors off them, okay? Because if BYU beats Texas Tech, I think that's it for Notre Dame's playoff chances. If BYU wins that game, they get an automatic bid as the Big 12 Conference champion, and Texas Tech is not going to fall out. There is no way, short of BYU winning, 70-0, that Texas Tech is going to be eliminated, because we saw last year, SMU lost in their conference championship, and they were already one of the top 12 teams, but they're not going to punish them for making the conference championship, because then it just removes all the value of making it to those games anyway, and they need those to matter. Or I should say, the conference commissioners need those to matter for television ratings, because at the end of the day, it's all about the television money in the sport. We all know that. So if BYU goes out there and they get that win, it would be a big upset. Texas Tech is favored by 13.5, but if they get that win, that means the Big 12 becomes a 2-bid league, and that is not good for Notre Dame. Notre Dame really cannot have that happen. Another good thing, too, is Texas Tech is just much better than them. They've been playing really well as of late. They destroyed West Virginia. I think they won that game 49-0 on the road, and I know West Virginia is not a very good team, but still, Texas Tech has just been dominating every single team they face week in and week out, and honestly, they should have dominated BYU in their first matchup, which wasn't that long ago. It was about a month ago. It was in Lubbock. Game day was there. Biggest game of the weekend. And Texas Tech won that game 29-7, but the score does not tell the full story. Texas Tech should have won that game by a lot more. They had 4 field goals under 40 yards. They kept getting stopped in the red zone, so they need to turn those drives into touchdowns. I would say this, though. I am worried that Texas Tech is not going to get any help from the officials, because it would be a lot better for the Big 12 if BYU were to win this game, because then the conference gets 2 teams in the college football playoff. So if it was an option to bet on which team would have more penalties called on them in a game, I would bet everything I have on Texas Tech, because I have a feeling that Brett Yormark, the conference commissioner over there at the Big 12, is probably going to encourage the Zebras to be a little loose with the yellow flags during that game and try to give BYU some help, because, I mean, Yormark, he says a lot. I don't know if you saw it. Earlier this week, he made a comment that he started to compare BYU and Notre Dame. I'm just going to look it up right now. And he said that BYU's been underappreciated all year long, and then he took a shot at Notre Dame for no reason, just literally no reason at all. Said something about, like, if you compare BYU and Notre Dame, yeah, here's a full quote. BYU has been underappreciated all season long, and when you compare them to Notre Dame, there is no comparison. When you think of strength of record, strength of schedule, and win-loss, they're better than Notre Dame. I mean, okay, agree to disagree on that one, Brett. But look, man, if BYU wins, they're in the playoff. But Texas Tech is going to play hard. That's one good thing. I don't think you have to worry about, like, Texas Tech potentially throwing the game and some grand conspiracy to get the Big 12 2 teams in the college football playoff, because if Texas Tech wins this game, I think they'll definitely get a bye in the college football playoff. So that's very important. Even though all the teams who had a bye lost last year, I think there's probably a little bit too much put into that, because you got to remember, Boise State had a bye and they had no chance of beating Penn State. And then Arizona State had a bye because they were the Big 12 championships last year, and that's when they were still doing the byes were given to the highest, to the conference champions, right? The 4 highest ranked conference champions. So that's not going to be the case this year. This year, the top 4 teams in the rankings are going to be the teams to get the bye. They're doing straight seeding this year, which they should have done from the beginning, but for whatever reason, they needed to let it unfold first before the obvious thing that everyone pointed out was dumb. They needed to change that, right? So anyway, if Texas Tech wins, they're going to get a bye, and if they beat them enough, I think BYU is certainly out of the equation. If it's a close game, if Texas Tech has to win on a game-winning field goal over BYU, the conversation is going to get interesting, right? But BYU is behind Notre Dame right now, and I expect them to be behind Notre Dame on Tuesday in the next college football rankings. The good thing for Notre Dame fans, that game is at noon Eastern. So we're all going to be nervous about it, but at least we can get it out of the way early on. We're not going to be sitting around all day waiting and hoping for Texas Tech. So I'm wearing Red Raider gear throughout this entire week. And I know I put this out on Twitter too. Like, Notre Dame fans and Texas Tech fans have had their differences on Twitter this year. I don't know where they just started talking a bunch of crap. It also started with their coach, McGuire, who took a shot at Notre Dame in his press conference. Again, don't know why these teams are taking shots at Notre Dame, but they're doing it. And that's what happened earlier this year. But I know there's been that fighting. Well, listen, Notre Dame fans, we're all rooting for Texas Tech on Saturday to win the Big 12. Then, in the 3:30 window, the Irish will need Georgia to avenge their loss to Bama from earlier in the season. This is not one of those situations like BYU where, like, if BYU wins, I think Notre Dame is out, right? Because BYU would then jump Notre Dame and they get the 2 bids. So then it would be bad all around for Notre Dame if that were to happen. But it would be really bad if BYU wins and Bama wins. Notre Dame would definitely be out in that case. But Georgia is only favored by 2.5 in this game, but they've been playing really well lately. I know that game against Georgia Tech was a little bit sloppy. I'm not reading too much into that game. Georgia had been playing really well. They dominated Texas just a few weeks ago. So I expect Georgia to win that game. And as I said earlier, I'm glad that Georgia is going to be in the SEC championship instead of Texas A&M, because I think they have a better chance of beating Alabama. Because if Alabama wins, and they'll definitely jump Notre Dame. And then I think Notre Dame would go from being 9th, which is where I expect they will be on Tuesday night, to 10th. So let's say Alabama wins and BYU loses. BYU losing is helpful, but Alabama would be at 9, Notre Dame would be at 10, BYU would drop from 11 to probably, I don't know, like 13 or 14, but then Miami could jump them. And then it's Notre Dame at 10, Miami at 11. In that case, would the committee finally give Miami the edge because of head-to-head? They haven't done it yet. They've said they've already taken it into account in their rankings, but when the 2 teams are ranked right next to each other and whoever is ranked 10th gets in the college football playoff, man, the heat on the committee is going to be higher than it's ever been. And usually in the college football playoff, ever since like the 14 playoff, things usually just work themselves out. That has not happened this year. So if BYU and Alabama both win, I don't think Notre Dame is going to make the playoff. I looked up, if you were to bet that as a parlay, it's plus 921 on FanDuel. That seems pretty high if you took BYU money line and Alabama money line. So the Irish are in a good spot, but we're going to be sweating out Saturday. That is for sure. It is not going to be a whole lot of fun, but if Texas Tech gets a job done and Georgia gets a job done, I think Notre Dame is going to be in the college football playoff. I say this all now. It's Sunday night. Maybe things change on Tuesday. We have not seen the next college football playoff rankings, but considering the only team in the top 12 who lost was Texas A&M, I don't expect to see that much change. I think Texas A&M is going to drop down to like 6 or 7. I think there's 7 in the AP poll, and I think the college football playoff ranking is going to reflect that as well. So I don't think that after Notre Dame beat Stanford and Miami beat Pitt the way they did, I don't think they're going to jump Notre Dame. I don't think Alabama is going to jump Notre Dame. So I think things are going to remain the same, but Saturday, you're going to be rooting hard for Texas Tech, and you're going to be rooting very hard for Georgia. If Notre Dame gets the results that they want there, I think they'll be just fine. I think Alabama is going to be in regardless. I expect that to be a pretty close game. I don't think the committee is going to drop a team in the SEC championship, especially a team like Alabama, too much if they lost to Georgia, a team that they already beat on the road earlier in the year. So if Georgia wins that game, I think Alabama stays right where they are at 10, presumably, where they'll be on Tuesday night. But then if Texas Tech beats BYU, then BYU is out of the conversation entirely, and I think it's going to look the exact same, 1 through 10, however they end up picking on Tuesday night. Maybe things change. Maybe the committee decides to vault Miami all the way up because the regular season is over. They're 10-2. They have the full body of work now. They're not projecting anything, but I would be surprised if that happened. I really think Notre Dame is going to be 9 on Tuesday for the 4th week in a row, and they have a good chance of making the college football playoff, but it is not a guarantee. But that is going to do it for this edition of Sunday Night Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not already, please subscribe on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform, and be sure to like, rate, and review the show. It really helps us grow. I'm going to be back on Tuesday with Luke Smith for our weekly segment where we dive into the 3 things we liked and 3 things we didn't like from the Stanford game. And if you were one of the 100 or so people in Palo Alto for the regular season finale, send in your boots on the ground report. You can do it the same way we do mailbag questions. Drop them in the YouTube comments, tag me on X at Locked On Irish, or DM me on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. We're going to read our favorite one on the show on Tuesday because Luke was not able to make the trip. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. I will see you on Tuesday.